In the mid-13th century, a storm was brewing in the east, an unstoppable force. The Mongol Empire had swept across Asia and into the heart of the Middle East, leaving a trail of shattered cities and fallen empires. From the plains of Hungary to the shores of the Pacific, no one had been able to halt their relentless advance. In 1258, they committed an act that sent shockwaves through the Islamic world, the sacking of Baghdad, the glorious capital of the Abbasid Caliphate. The city was razed, its libraries burned, and its people slaughtered. The Mongols, led by Hulagu Khan, a grandson of the legendary Genghis Khan, seemed invincible. Their next target, the rich lands of Egypt and the Levant, the heartland of the Mamluk Sultanate. It seemed like the end of days. The Mongol horde was a finely tuned war machine. Their cavalry was unmatched, their commanders brilliant, and their reputation for brutality was a weapon in itself. City after city surrendered without a fight, terrified of the fate that awaited them if they resisted. The Christian kingdoms of the Levant, like the Armenians and Georgians, even allied with the Mongols, hoping to reclaim lands from the Muslims. The situation for the Mamluks in Cairo looked bleak. They were the last major Islamic power standing in the Mongols' path. Who were these Mamluks? They weren't a traditional dynasty. They were a military class of slave soldiers, mostly of Turkic and Circassian origin, who had risen through the ranks to seize power in Egypt. They were fierce, disciplined, and masters of cavalry warfare, but they had never faced an enemy like the Mongols. The Sultan of the Mamluks was a young man named Qutuz. As the Mongol envoys arrived in Cairo, they delivered a chilling message from Hulagu Khan, a demand for absolute submission, surrender, or face annihilation. It was the same ultimatum given to countless others who were now dust. Any other ruler might have buckled, but Qutuz was different. He had been born a prince, captured and sold into slavery as a child, and had fought his way to the very top. He knew what it was to lose everything, and he was not about to bow to any earthly power. In a stunning act of defiance, Qutuz executed the Mongol envoys and displayed their heads on the gates of Cairo. There was no turning back. It was a declaration of total war. But this act of bravery came at a perilous time. Hulagu Khan, upon hearing news of his brother, Menenga Khan's death back in Mongolia, had taken the bulk of his army with him to secure his own position in the succession crisis. He left behind a smaller, yet still formidable, force of around 20,000 warriors under the command of his most trusted general, Kitbuka Noyan. This was the Mamluks' chance, a window of opportunity that might never open again. Qutuz knew he had to act fast. He gathered his emirs and rallied his forces, delivering a passionate speech that stirred their hearts. He reminded them of their duty to defend their faith, their families, and their homes from the invaders who had desecrated Baghdad. He wasn't just fighting for Egypt. He was fighting for the very soul of their civilization. One of Qutuz's most crucial decisions was to seek an alliance with a former rival, Baybars. Baybars was a brilliant and ambitious Mamluk commander who had been exiled and was technically an enemy of the state. But Qutuz was he knew he needed Baybars' military genius. Putting aside their personal differences, Qutuz welcomed Baybars back, promising him the city of Aleppo if they were victorious. With Baybars at his side, the Mamluk army was stronger than ever. They marched out of Egypt, taking a huge gamble by leaving their homeland undefended. Their path took them through territory controlled by the Christian Crusaders of Acre. In another masterful diplomatic move, Qutuz negotiated safe passage and the ability to resupply his army from the Crusaders, who, despite their historical enmity with the Muslims, feared the Mongols even more. The two armies finally met on September 3, 1260, in a place in Galilee called Ain Jalut, which translates to the Spring of Goliath. The name was fitting. The Mamluks were about to play the role of David against the Mongol Goliath. Qutuz chose the battlefield carefully. It was a large, enclosed valley, perfect for an ambush. He knew he couldn't beat the Mongols in a straight, open-field battle. He needed a secret weapon, a tactic that would turn the Mongols' greatest strength, their aggressive, overwhelming charge, into their greatest weakness. Qutuz hid the bulk of his elite cavalry in the hills and trees surrounding the valley, leaving a smaller force, led by the charismatic Baybars, visible at the valley's entrance. This was the bait. As the sun rose, the Mongol general Kitbuka saw what he thought was the entire Mamluk army. Underestimating their numbers, he ordered a full frontal assault. The Mongol heavy cavalry thundered across the plain, confident of another easy victory. Baybars and his men engaged them in a fierce, chaotic skirmish. They fought with incredible skill, but they were outnumbered. As planned, Baybars ordered a feigned retreat. This was a classic Mongol tactic, used to break enemy formations. Seeing their enemies seemingly flee in terror, the Mongols did exactly what Qutuz had predicted. They charged recklessly forward, deeper and deeper into the valley, eager to chase down the fleeing Mamluks and finish the battle. Their discipline broke, their formations scattered. They had swallowed the bait whole. And then, the trap was sprung. At a signal from Qutuz, the hidden Mamluk cavalry burst from the surrounding hills, charging down into the valley from three sides. The Mongols were completely surrounded. The hunters had become the hunted. the Valley of Ain Jalut turned into a slaughterhouse. Shocked and disoriented, the Mongol warriors, who had never known such a tactic used against them, fought with desperate courage, but they were trapped. The Mamluk forces, fresh and organized, crashed into their flanks and rear. The momentum of the battle shifted dramatically. Even surrounded, the Mongols were terrifying opponents. At one point, the Mamluk left wing began to buckle under the sheer ferocity of a Mongol counterattack. The battle hung in the balance. Seeing his line about to break, Sultan Qutuz himself threw his helmet to the ground so his men could see his face, and roared "Wa is O for Islam," and charged directly into the fray, rallying his men. Inspired by their sultan's incredible bravery, the Mamluks redoubled their efforts. The tide turned decisively. The legendary Mongol general, Kitbuka, was captured. He was brought before Qutuz defiant to the end. He warned that the Khan would avenge him, but his words were empty. He was executed, and the Mongol army was systematically destroyed. For the first time in over 4 decades, a Mongol army had been decisively defeated in a major field battle. The news of the victory at Ain Jalut spread like wildfire. It shattered the myth of Mongol invincibility forever. The Mamluks had not just saved Egypt, they had saved the Islamic heartlands of the Levant and the holy cities of Mecca and Medina from certain destruction. The Mongol advance westward was halted permanently. They would never again seriously threaten Egypt. Baybars, the hero of the battle, would eventually assassinate Qutuz and become sultan himself, ruling for 17 years and cementing the Mamluk Sultanate as the dominant power in the Middle East for the next 2 centuries. So what was the secret weapon that destroyed the Mongol horde? It wasn't a new type of sword or a revolutionary bow. It was strategy. It was deception. It was the brilliant use of a feigned retreat, a tactic the Mongols themselves had perfected, turned back against them with devastating effect. It was the leadership of Qutuz who united his people and took a monumental gamble. And it was the courage of the Mamluk soldiers who stood their ground when the rest of the world had fled. The Battle of Ain Jalut is a timeless lesson that the smartest fighter, not always the strongest, wins the day. It was a turning point in world history, a moment when the tide of conquest was finally turned back, all thanks to a clever plan at the Spring of Goliath. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe for more epic stories from history.